Welcome to the second segment of Aararat Consulting's 10 Commandments of Conflict Resolution. You remember from our first segment, we were saying that there are three sides to every story. There's his side, her side, and what really happened. Your job in management, your job as a person that's supposed to resolve conflict is to figure out what really happened, otherwise known as the truth. However, from a psychological point of view, as you remember from the first segment, we said that everybody, psychologically speaking, has this self-preservationist attitude about themselves. And that self-preservationist attitude says, I'm okay, I'm not a bad person. So, when two people are in conflict with each other, most conflicts are because of ignorance. And ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance when you're the manager, ignorance when you're the person who's trying to get people to stop fighting, ignorance when your department is being slowed down or your department's being non-productive because of conflict, ignorance is not bliss. It's aggravating and it's expensive. But here's the issue. Because of a conflict of perception, when I look at a conflict that I'm in, I'm not going to see the perception of the other person. I'm only considering my own perception. In other words, I'm ignorant. I'm ignorant of the other party's spin on this. I'm ignorant as to what the other party may have heard or may have understood. So as you start to resolve conflict and as you start to look for what's the basis of the perception of each of these two parties, what you're really looking for is you're looking for miscommunication and you're looking for misunderstanding. Because for virtually any conflict, it starts with miscommunication, and miscommunication leads to misunderstanding, and misunderstanding leads to conflict. And that's worth repeating. For virtually any conflict you're going to deal with, the vast majority of them are only because of a breakdown in communication. And as you'll see in one of our Communication 10 Commandments series, people are lazy communicators. So they don't hear what the other person has to say. They don't consider what the other person has to say. And they're certainly not trying to perceive the conflict from the other person's perception. So what they do is they interpret it according to their own way of thinking. And if we go back to the first segment, we remember that normal is what I like to do. And self-preservation is going to dictate that I'm going to figure out that I'm okay. In other words, the problem's not with me. But if I'm not aware, that's what ignorance is, it's a lack of awareness. If I'm not aware of what the other party says, thinks, and feels, then all I've got to go by is my own perception, and that's where the conflict comes in. People misunderstand what I say, and then they misunderstand what I say because probably I'm a lousy communicator, or at least I'm not very succinct in my communication, and then they run with it. And then when they run with it, we start to imagine a whole bunch of things. And when we imagine things, we tend to imagine that we're in the right. Again, that's self-preservation. So your job as a manager is to get both sides, not to be ignorant. Your job as a manager is to sit down with both sides and get each of them to listen to each other. Listen to each other's perception. And what will happen so often is they'll go, oh, I didn't understand that's what you meant. Or, oh, I didn't hear you when you said this part. See, in other words, when we can identify where the miscommunication occurred, then we can diagnose what the misunderstanding was and the conflict goes away. So, how do we resolve conflict? Get both parties to give careful consideration to what the other party says, thinks, and feels. Eliminate the ignorance. And then we eliminate what we imagine. And remember, when we imagine, we will imagine that we're in the right. And why do we imagine that we're in the right? Because of the psychological truism that we are all self-preservationist in nature. So we will default to a position that we're right. Not because we're self-aggrandizing, not because we're conceited, not because we're arrogant, not because we're narcissistic. It's a defense mechanism that everybody is geared towards because we all believe deep down that I'm okay.